George Piro, welcome to Unfair Fight.
Well, thank you. This is great. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
Of course, and for those that don't know, highly decorated FBI special agent, probably most famous for being the interrogator of Saddam Hussein. But I think today what we really wanted to cover is a lot more of your career and your story coming to the United States. Obviously, on this show, we really like to talk and feature high-performance individuals and learn kind of the common traits across them in high-performance orgs. And to make it even more special, we're here at the American Top Team Gym, probably the greatest MMA gym in the world.
Absolutely.
And as a huge MMA fan, this one's really special. So, I'd love to get into a little bit of your childhood. Like, where'd you grow up? What led you coming to the United States, and ultimately, what was that path that got you into the FBI?
Absolutely. So I was born and raised in Beirut, Lebanon. My family and I were able to escape the horrible civil war that started about 1974, 1975, and as you can imagine, over time, things got worse. Conditions really deteriorated. It became really not only violent, but just unbearable for us. And my dad, who's really my role model and hero, made the difficult decision to relocate the family to provide us a better future opportunity and safety in a sense. So we fled Lebanon in July of 1979 when I was 12, and made the long journey to the United States, settling in Northern California.
Talk to me about that period of time. Like, what do you remember? And like, how did you actually get out of country? I mean, was that a challenge? I mean, was it, over land, over air, or how'd that work?
No, absolutely. It was extremely difficult, because the Civil War was at its highest point. So we fled our town before sunrise because of the danger of getting caught. So we packed what we could, made the journey to the port, got on a little fishing boat from Beirut to Cyprus, the five of us, and then from Cyprus, made the journey to the United States, settling in Northern California.
Oh, Northern California.
Yes.
Now, at 12, did you grasp the gravity and the risk of that kind of escape? Did it feel real, or was it, I'm sure your father, mom did, of course.
I did, in a sense, because during that last year, it was a really difficult time to be in Lebanon. I mean, I have a very clear, vivid recollection of my time in Lebanon, or that period. And I remember having to rush to a bomb shelter and ended up staying in the bomb shelter for several days because our town was getting bombed. I remember becoming a victim of sniper fire. My youngest uncle at age 16 was killed when he was at a movie theater, and the movie theater was targeted by bombing or mortar fire, because again it drew the young men from our town. So all of that is still very clear in my memory, and I remember the challenges or the difficulty of that time frame. The shortage of food, water, and then there was constantly funerals and death and things associated with war.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of similarities to what's going on in eastern Ukraine right now as well. Well, not even eastern. I mean, Odessa's been targeted heavily lately. So you make it, so you're in Cyprus.
Yes.
How do you get to the U.S. next? Were you in Cyprus for a long time?
No, just overnight, and then took a flight to San Francisco. So fortunately, my uncle had moved to Northern California.
Right.
My uncle was a Monsignor in our Catholic church, and the church had brought him to the United States, and he had become a U.S. citizen. So he was able to sponsor us, and
Incredible.
We were very fortunate to have the opportunity to immigrate to the United States legally through his sponsorship.
Oh, that's incredible. And so you're 12. Clearly, you got into martial arts at some point, right? Kind of talk to me about what drew you into law enforcement ultimately.
So I will tell you, when we immigrated at 12, I actually couldn't speak a word of English. So what really got me started in martial arts is, even though we were poor immigrants here in the United States, my parents wanted to find an activity or a sport that my younger brother and I could do to help us learn English or improve our English, assimilate, make friends, things like that. And they knew both my brother and I were very passionate about martial arts or had a huge interest. You know, if you remember in 1979, Bruce Lee was an icon and still is, of course. But you know, so they somehow, again, I'm very, very fortunate for the amazing parents that I had. They scraped the money together and enrolled us in a karate dojo, and so that kind of started my, you know, my journey in martial arts, and I've been doing martial arts on and off, you know, my entire life since then.
That's incredible. We'll talk more about that a little bit later because obviously I have tons of questions. So Jen, were you in the military part of the Bureau?
Yes.
Is that correct? I remember that correctly?
Yes. So I actually got my U.S. citizenship at 17. I naturalized as a U.S. citizen at 17, and then on my 18th birthday, I enlisted in the Air Force.
Oh, the Air Force. And what was your kind of path in the Air Force?
So I always wanted to get into law enforcement.
Right.
I was very drawn to law enforcement, and people ask me, why were you, you know, what interested you about law enforcement? You know, I wanted a career that was an adventure, that was challenging, that was going to be exciting. Plus a career where, you know, you really get to appreciate a sense of purpose, a brotherhood, kind of, you know, something, you know, bigger than you, and I recognized that would be very, very possible in law enforcement. So when I enlisted in the Air Force, I actually went into the security police to begin my law enforcement career or training. And then at 21, I joined the Ceres Police Department in Northern California, a phenomenal police agency out there, and it was everything that I expected. I remained in the reserves and did 13 and a half years in the Air Force Reserves until I was very, very fortunate to have the ability to join the Bureau. When I joined the FBI, you couldn't be in the reserves and be in the FBI, so the FBI forced me to give up my Air Force Reserve career.
So how old were you when you joined the Bureau?
So I joined the Bureau when I was 31. So I became a police officer when I was 21. I did 9 years, 8 months as a police officer, and then was fortunate enough to get hired into the FBI and went off to Quantico when I was 31.
Oh. Now, what do you remember most from your training as you were going through kind of the selection and training process, you know, at the Bureau? Like, does anything stick with you? Because one of the things I'm always curious, Bureau is just a storied organization, and every agent I've met has just been absolutely top notch, and I have a lot of Bureau friends. What I'm curious though is, did you see a theme in your training or the org or the type of people they selected that kind of led to a high performance org, you know, that it is?
Well, it comes down to the folks that we do recruit. You know, the one thing about the FBI, you know, the FBI brand is recognized worldwide, and we really don't have to do a lot to recruit. You know, what I believe are the best candidates for the organization. You know, as we historically say, we hire based on 3 things: character, ability, and then skill. Character being the most important. So literally, I remember when I got to Quantico and we were introducing ourselves, I was shocked that I was in that group because of the high caliber and the high performers that were around me. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to join the FBI, or why I was drawn. I'd met a young FBI agent when I was a detective working a bank robbery, and I was so impressed by his work ethic, integrity, intelligence, professionalism. It made me want to be part of an organization that had that caliber of folks, and I was not disappointed when I reported to Quantico.
Now, when you first joined the Bureau, what was your focus? Were you more on the kind of law enforcement side, or did you ever start moving into the intelligence side of it? Because I know there's kind of 2 halves. And we can insert all the jokes about FBI and CIA getting along or not getting along.
So when I joined the FBI, of course, I thought I was going to go into the criminal division.
Okay.
Again, because I was a police officer for nearly 10 years.
Sure.
I was a detective for about 4 years.
Oh, you were? Okay.
I worked career criminal, homicide, major narcotics. I was on SWAT. You know, I did all of those things thinking I would end up working violent crime, and that's what I wanted to work.
Sure.
However, the FBI recognized that I had a unique skill that was very important to the FBI national security mission, which was I was able to speak Arabic.
Yep.
So I was immediately upon graduation from Quantico assigned to the counterterrorism investigative.
When was this? What, just for framing, around what year was this?
So I reported to Quantico in March of 1999. I graduated from Quantico in July and reported to the Phoenix field office of the FBI at that point, and was assigned to the international terrorism team.
So that was really standing up, because I know, you know, obviously there was a focus on Al-Qaeda already even back then. I think I'm trying to remember when the USS Cole bombing happened. I felt like it was pretty close to around then, wasn't it?
Yes, it was in 1998.
98, that's what I thought. And the attack on our embassies in Africa was also around there. So it makes sense, you know, kind of time. So you stepped in like at the perfect time.
Yes, so when I reported to the international terrorism team, our focus was already on Al-Qaeda, and that was the major threat or biggest threat that we were facing. So we were already kind of understanding the potential threat that AQ represented to the United States.
Sure. So yeah, the language skills are huge. Because how many Arabic-speaking special agents were there back then? Do you remember? I felt like it was a very maybe less than 10 in the late 90s.
It was about.
I don't remember.
It was between 10 and 12 native speakers.
Native speakers.
Yeah. It was a very small number.
That's incredible. And so. All right, so you joined the counterterrorism, task force. Were you U.S. based at this time? Like, when did you start deploying? Because I understand that you spent a lot of time overseas as well.
Yes. So initially, I was based in Phoenix.
Right.
That was the field office that I was assigned to, and then of course I had the opportunity to work on the 9/11 investigative team. If you recall, two of the hijackers, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Hani Hanjour, had spent a significant amount of time in Phoenix. Hani had received a lot of his flight training in Phoenix, so the Phoenix field office had a major role to play when it came to American Airlines Flight 77, which is the flight that was taken over by Nawaf al-Hazmi and Hani Hanjour and two others, and it of course crashed into the Pentagon. So I was working the 9/11 investigation after 2001, and then at that time, Director Mueller created a elite counterterrorism rapid deployment team known as the FLY team.
Right.
And they advertised for candidates to go through selection. I was attracted to that unit because it provided both an investigative as well as a tactical response mission. So I tried out and was fortunate enough I was selected as one of the original members of the flight team, and ended up moving to Washington, D.C.
Wow. It's when you think back on your life, there's like these pivotal moments, and it always makes you wonder, where would my life have been? One, escaping Beirut, Lebanon, the Civil War, and then you get to the Bureau right when the CT game is heating up. You have perfect skills. I just think about sometimes, my own life. I was, 12 years in intelligence, service, and I actually blew out my knees, believe it or not, in a stupid skiing accident. That's what made me leave and start the current company, Black Point Cyber.
Yeah.
So when I think about these kind of pivotal times, it's always wild looking back. And so, all right, so now you're a member of the fly team. Walk, obviously what we can talk about.
Yes,
We don't
absolutely. So the fly team was designed to be able to deploy worldwide to address counterterrorism threats against the United States or U.S. citizens. So actually, I reported to the fly team. Selection was in 2002, end of 2002, and then I reported in March of 2003. I literally landed in D.C., dropped my bags off, picked up my next set of gear, and then deployed to Iraq.
Oh, so, Iraq.
Yes. So I went to
Really?
Iraq in, I believe it was end of March. So it was literally just as Baghdad fell.
Right.
I was part of the first small FBI deployment into Baghdad, and I was there until July of '03.
Incredible, incredible. So you ended up. It was my understanding in Iraq. Obviously, we have the kind of most famous part of your career, and I actually want to talk about a lot of the other parts outside of Saddam,
Yeah.
just because I think sometimes a storied career. I mean, that was obviously a massive success,
Yeah.
but there's so much more to
Oh,
it.
absolutely.
You know, that's
Yeah.
I think really interesting for folks to unpack. Now, then it's my understanding you were kind of working quite closely with the military in your time in Iraq.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Not
Talk about
only-
that. This is
yeah.
something I never knew the Bureau was doing, to be
No,
honest. And it seems highly, one, a very awesome opportunity.
Incredible experience and opportunity.
Very few get to do it, I think.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
our initial footprint in Iraq was very, very small. So it was myself and another flight team operator, a couple of HRT operators,
Okay.
and then folks from document exploitation, because that was some of the missions that we had there. So we were not only pursuing FBI investigative and intelligence operations or addressing our needs, but we were also there to support the U.S. military and the CIA. Now we can joke about
Yeah.
the relationship, but we are really partners, and
Yeah.
our mission is, one supports and complements the other. What was unique for me is, if you remember back in March of '03, there was a shortage and a significant need for Arabic speakers across all of the interagency or the
Yeah.
intelligence community, whether it was the military, the CIA, the FBI. So for me, when I was on the ground and people found out I actually spoke Arabic, I was getting asked to assist or support on things well beyond, the typical FBI operations or missions. And of course, as the Bureau is a very committed member of the intelligence community and a committed partner,
Right.
I was allowed to support our interagency partners. So all that basically means is the military would call and say, hey, we need an Arabic speaker to go out with us on this operation. Are you available? And I would say yes, with the commander's approval. And then I find myself working with an elite tier 1 unit,
Very
going
nice.
out on a capture operation, and find myself in places like Samra and Tikrit and
Wow.
Fallujah and things like that, doing things I used to read about in novels and see in motion pictures, and
Yeah.
here I was. You were asking me some of the unique experiences. I remember I'd be out on these operations, and of course I'm in my tactical gear, and I'm communicating with the Iraqis, and some of the Iraqis would be asking me, hey, why is the Lebanese army here helping the U.S. military?
here.
And I'd have to tell them I'm not Lebanese, I'm
Right.
actually an American,
Right.
and I would, the American flag that I wore across my chest got bigger and bigger with every operation, just to make it, very clear to everyone that I was an American.
Unbelievable.
Again, of course, because
Yeah.
I look and
Yeah.
I speak, as a native speaker, so
Sure.
I would get misidentified quite often.
That is unbelievable. Now, would you find yourself, if you can talk about it, if not, that's fine. When you went on these missions, did you see like your role was, it was probably all of these things, but mostly helping coordinate Iraqis? Were you using your kind of interviewing, debriefing, or interrogation skills, whatever word you'd like to use on subjects that were captured? Or was it more kind of part of the exploitation of the intelligence you're trying to gather post-raid? And bringing it back, because I know that was always a big line of operations.
Absolutely. No, so I didn't focus a lot on the post
Okay.
operational exploitation. And not only we, but DoD and the agency had phenomenal translators and interpreters who were much better at that. My role was to provide not only on-site as we called it, tactical interrogation on location to try to identify who the bad guys are, who the terrorists, who should we take back or detain, as well as help in source operations and recruiting Iraqis to help us identify where HVT, high-value targets are, or locations that were of interest to the U.S. government.
So here you are, 10-year law enforcement officer. You enter the bureau. Did you ever think that you'd be basically doing raids with Tier 1 special operations units?
No, in a war zone.
Yeah,
absolutely not. That was something I never thought I would ever, have the privilege or the opportunity to serve my country in that sense, and of course the organization. But it was an incredible experience. It was very, very fun, very dangerous, but it was incredibly exciting, especially being so young in my career.
Would you find, especially working with Tier 1 special operations units, those folks are cut from a different cloth?
Yes.
What similarities did you find with the Bureau or with CIA folks, and did you ever find any similarities with, and what makes them achieve? And here, same at American Top Team, I mean, you have incredibly dedicated, kind of folks here, like besides the character, any other specific traits that you'd notice?
Absolutely. Whether we're talking about elite, world-class professional fighters, or Tier 1 operators, or highly successful, CIA officers or FBI special agents. The one thing that separates, and I say this all the time, folks, is everybody wants to be a champion, but not everybody's willing to do what it takes to become a champion. And when you look at those Tier 1 operators or the elite world-class fighters, and then even here you'll see that there's a distinction between those that are truly world champions and those are just happy being professional fighters, is that drive and the discipline that they have, and then that they demonstrate, that separates them from everyone else.
I think this is kind of a trait in the business world, maybe less intense, but one of the things when you look at hiring, it's like, boy, you have to take your time hiring. Make sure. I've made some bad hires, and boy, does it sends you backwards very quickly. But looking for those folks that can manage up, manage down, manage across, is something that I've found in my time. I didn't quite grasp how important it was.
Absolutely. The common mistake with that is, we tend to hire based on experience versus potential. Yeah,
that's true, and we tend, especially in the commercial world, to not put as much time into training.
Yes.
That's always an area where it's a double-edged sword, right, in the commercial world, because a lot of times you train someone well enough to basically leave. But then, to me, I think that's kind of failed leadership in the organization if you haven't gotten people bought into the mission enough. So, yeah, it's fascinating. That drive really, really separates. And I know as, kind of being a CEO now, it's something that when you find the person that has the drive, you can almost talk less. They understand kind of commander's intent and go execute. It just makes your org flourish and grow that much faster, and it makes a lot of sense. And you've been the few that have been able to work with so many different organizations, to kind of get there. All right, so you're part of the fly team in Iraq. How long were you there?
So that particular tour was 90 days.
Okay.
So at that period, we were doing 90-day rotations, and a lot of the other units were doing similar time frames. The Tier 1s, everyone was on about a 90-day tour. So I came back, I went to Gitmo, and then I came back, and in between had some small deployments, and then of course in December of 2003, Saddam was captured, and on Christmas Eve I was selected to be the interrogator team leader for the FBI team. Deployed in January of 2004 and spent nearly 8 months in Iraq, came back in August.
8 months straight.
Yes.
Wow.
And then when I came back, I was asked to lead the effort to build the prosecutive report against Saddam. So I spent the next 6 months.
Oh, I did not know this.
So I spent the next 6 months working on building the criminal case against Saddam to provide to the Iraqis, because the Iraqis had asked the FBI's assistance,
It's incredible.
again being a world-class agency, in helping them build a complex,
Right.
difficult criminal case. So I did that and completed it. I think it was about March of 2005, and then volunteered for a rotation to Afghanistan.
Man.
And went off to Afghanistan and was with another Tier 1 element,
Sure.
the other Tier 1
Yeah,
element. And spent 4 months in Afghanistan with that element, and again an incredible experience and
Sure.
opportunity. And then came back, and at some point I was very privileged. I was promoted and became the Joint Terrorism Task Force Supervisor for the Washington Field Office of the FBI, and my team was responsible for investigating threats against the national capital region from international terrorist organizations. So my goal and my team's goal was to protect our national capital from international terrorists, and at that time, as you know,
Right.
AQ was the most prominent threat. So
For sure.
spent several years in that position, and then again was privileged to get promoted and was the assistant special agent in charge for counterterrorism in the Washington, D.C. area.
Do you remember a moment in that stint in your career that was the toughest and, kind of toughest challenge you had to deal with, and kind of how'd you get through it?
I would say, that time, there wasn't a really tough,
Right.
it was challenging because of the number of threats,
Right.
and the workload and things like that. It was a demanding
Right.
time, but I had an incredibly high-performing
Right.
team. I believe I had the best investigative team, and I would tell everyone
Right.
around me
Yep.
at Washington Field I had the best squad or best team. So we were constantly working. For example, we did the threat against President Obama's inauguration. We did the threat against State of the Union, the Marine Corps Museum shooting,
Right.
the Pentagon shooting. So that team was incredibly successful, very hardworking, very, very dedicated. So in that sense, every day was demanding and challenging. But for me, that wasn't my the toughest experience in my bureau.
Unit
career.
cohesion was strong there.
Oh, very strong.
Yeah,
we're
that's
very high performing.
another key trait. Do you remember any tactic or kind of tactics you used, whether it was running meetings, ensuring follow-up, that you found from kind of your time in the bureau that you think translates to the business world?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I take from that entire experience is my ability to be both strategic and tactical.
Right.
So in one sense, I'm able to quickly prioritize what I need to accomplish.
Sure.
I recognize what the long-term plan is, but also recognize that if you focus solely just on at the end or that long-term
Right.
goal, you're not really going to set yourself up for success, because you have to take those steps.
Right.
And then for me, I identify achievable short-term goals that build on each other, and then makes that long-term goal very, very possible.
Right.
Of course, I'm because of my experience, my ability to manage stress and
Yeah,
chaos
apparently.
is to me now is an incredible skill, and the discipline that comes with that. But now I also really appreciate, as you talked about, the importance of leadership and mentoring. What separates a very successful, high-performing organization or a unit, it starts with the leader.
Right.
The better the communication, the better the empowerment, the trust, all of that stuff is going to translate into output. So I recognize all of that, and I bring that now to every aspect, including my professional fighting training and commitment.
And so you're back in D.C. It's my understanding you're the SAC of the special agent in charge of the Miami field office.
Eventually, I had the.
So what was the gap? What were the other steps in there?
So assistant special agent in charge for counterterrorism, and then again I was very fortunate. I was given the opportunity to become the director of the High Value Detainee Interrogation Group, which is the interagency group assigned to the National Security Council, created by President Obama to really take on the most difficult interrogations on behalf of the entire U.S. government.
Sure.
So I led that team for a period, and that was a really wonderful experience because not only did I learn a lot about the scientific aspect of interrogations, but also about leadership and communication, which made me a much better leader at the end of the day. Then I became Deputy Assistant Director for the Weapons of Mass Destruction Directorate at FBI headquarters, working for one of the greatest bosses, Jon Piro. And then at some point,
Right.
the special agent in charge of the Miami field office came open, and it was my dream job, and
Right.
it's the one I wanted. So I applied, and was very, very fortunate that I was selected.
Sure.
In 2014, and then reported to Miami as we call it, the SAC of the Miami field office.
When have you seen cyber make a big impact on operations? And obviously it can be defense, offense, and we've got to be careful on certain topics here. I'm just curious. Obviously, we have a lot of folks that are deep in the IT security and IT world, and I think a lot of folks don't understand how impactful some of the intelligence you can drive or use some of these tools.
With cyber, every year the threat is not only evolving but significantly growing. From the FBI's perspective, and maybe this is a wrong way to kind of look at it, but I looked at it when I was the head of the Miami field office. Was I looked at the cyber threat in one sense. It was a two-pronged threat, right?
Sure.
So you have your national security threat, which is the foreign state actors, because their goal is very different. Now their tactics, their means, all of their techniques may be similar, but their purpose is to degrade our government, our capabilities, make us vulnerable to a variety of different national security and global threats. It's a different level of warfare. Then you have the criminal cyber actors who, at the end of the day, while they're using similar tactics, their goal is to criminally profit from their activity. And I don't think people really understand and appreciate how significant the threats are. Again, from the national security perspective, when you look at our foreign state actors, again, and it's very public, that China represents a very significant threat. Iran, North Korea, Russia, and then of course on the criminal side, all the ransomware and the business email compromises and all of these things that are occurring that are costing companies not only a significant amount of dollars or revenue, but also it could potentially collapse a company. So I began to recognize the importance of our cyber mission, and then really on a broader sense the USG cyber mission. Well before I became a special agent in charge. But of course, as the special agent in charge of the Miami field office, I became personally responsible for that. Ultimately, and really understood its importance, and then the threat, and then constant. But it's difficult because technology changes. We as a government do not adapt, and we're not as agile as the actors. Our laws aren't as agile or adaptive, and then on top of that, it's difficult to be able to develop that expertise and then maintain that.
It really is. It's something, I was at a dinner, I don't know, DC, kind of a think tank dinner, I don't know, maybe 8 months. A lot of, big former names from the government. And, I was hearing one of the folks from this university say, our biggest issues were missing cyber leaders, and I actually took a big issue with that, because to me, to be great, whether it's a sport, business, you have to master fundamentals first. And, fundamentals in the cyber world are like networking, Windows administration, things like that, before you can actually be really competent at an offensive or defensive mission. And in my mind, and it's a lot closer to a trade. Right? If you think about an electrician, you have kind of, you have an apprentice, a journeyman, a master, or you go through, kind of residency and specialization as a doctor. Right? I really feel like in our country, it's going to be really hard to close like the skills gap and the quantity of skills that we need, unless this has started to be trained specifically starting in high school.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if you think about before the internet, we're reliant on, well, we still are, plumbing, electrician. I mean, all the trades. Like now we have another one, in my opinion, and I think the country would be well served in the education system to invest a lot more up front in this, because you're spot on. I mean, when we look at, nation state threats, the term CNO, really means exploitation, right? So that's kind of getting on data you take. Attack could be destruction or defense, right? And one of the challenges we have is nation states want to do exploitation for intelligence collection purposes, intellectual property theft. I mean, you'd be shocked.
Yeah.
We did a response. It was the Chinese. They came into a small manufacturing shop that made a very critical part for basically a satellite, a space part. They hit the server to go right to the CNC machine. Think about it. Like, what a way to grab intellectual property. You grab the AutoCAD files and you're ripping after that. So one's that. The other part is what we'd call kind of preparation of the environment, or the virtual battlefield, which is kind of seeding latent capabilities. So in such time of conflict, war, if someone wanted to conduct covert action against us, they could destroy. And then we have the economic part, which is what's going on with the ransomware groups. I mean, it's with the end of July 2023. This past week, we did 63 saves against intrusions into Microsoft 365, and we did 12 mass ransom saves. That's just us. Imagine the entire, so the space is really huge. And the part I'm curious your opinion on is, do you see any nexus or connection between some of like the active organized ransomware groups and intelligence services for the countries they operate out of?
Yeah, that is becoming very, very murky.
It is.
And, unlike here in the United States, certain foreign nation states are able to leverage, utilize, recruit, employ these criminal hackers or cyber criminals to do far beyond what they were intending to do, and using their skill sets. We don't necessarily, in a democracy and under the way our core values, we don't do that. But other countries don't have the same ethical or moral ground. But you brought up a really good point. When I was here in Miami, we recognized trying to recruit at the college level was too late. We were missing a lot of great candidates. So we started a program with Nova Southeastern to try to recruit kids at the high school. So we had a partnership to recruit kids in high school, and then I think pretty soon we're going to be, and we should be looking at almost junior high level to try to recruit and entice service.
I couldn't agree more.
There's a big draw to go into the private sector, things like that, but there's no greater calling than serving our country and service. So,
like we talked about, it's still the greatest country on earth.
It truly is.
Yeah.
And I truly believe I'm a perfect example of that. And people ask me, what am I most proud of, in my FBI career? Of course, I've been very fortunate, and in some ways I've been very lucky at an incredible career. But I really look at my service as a means for me to repay my family and I's debt to this country, to allow us to come here. So, I still see that as a responsibility or an obligation to be able to live the American dream. There's no other country as great as this one. Sometimes we forget that.
Yeah,
and
it's easy to forget that in the news cycle.
We need to remind people, this is still the greatest country in the world.
You know, you touched on something really developing kind of that talent pipeline, because what I'm seeing right now, for what it's worth in the commercial world, having kind of been on both sides, we have a massive skills shortage. We have a level of skill issue and then a volume of skill issue at the same time. And you know, it's interesting. We almost don't hire folks with cybersecurity degrees. We almost have we do sometimes if they're really good, but we almost have a standing rule against it because the fundamentals are not being built in the college programs. It kind of teaches buttonology, and you don't really have those core fundamentals, which makes it really hard to be a good defender. I mean, that's why I feel like, you know, having done offense for so long, when you see the bad guy in his, you know, kind of from his lens, you know exactly where he is in the operation. It's a lot easier to disrupt, and I would really love to see a lot more investment earlier on. The fact that the Bureau is doing that is absolutely fantastic. We tend to focus on, you know, hacking clubs in college, believe it or not, and sponsoring them, and folks that are naturally, you know, kind of inclined to and curious to go down that path. So, talk to me about your time in Miami as a SAC. You know, any specific? Obviously, I know you guys had some tough operations that you had to deal with. You know, talk me through how you dealt with kind of crisis leadership.
So, you know, in one sense, it was an incredible privilege to lead in the FBI and to lead one of the best, if not the best office in the FBI.
Right.
You know, I believe 900 amazing, very dedicated employees committed to the FBI mission of, you know, protecting the United States and upholding the U.S. Constitution. The one thing that I really loved about Miami was the incredible work, you know, that was being done every day by an incredible workforce, but we were so busy.
Right.
There's a lot of work here,
right,
and a lot of exciting work too. I know it kind of sounds bad when I talk about it that way, but you know, it made it very exciting to come to work. You know, from significant or, you know, some of the biggest healthcare fraud schemes to public corruption to violent crime. The drug trafficking organizations that were operating out of, you know, Latin America and it being, you know, Miami as their kind of, you know, their hub and staging point, to international terrorism, and then of course counterintelligence. Right, we have the largest Cuban population in the United States or community. Largest Venezuelan population community. We have the second largest Russian population in the United States, you know, and of course China is very, very active here. So, you know, there was no shortage of work. So every day we were doing some incredible work, you know, that people don't necessarily hear about every day, and it gets ignored, but incredible work. But yes, when you're operating at that, you know, at that level, at that operational tempo, there's a lot of risk associated with that. There's a lot of danger. You know, sometimes again we forget how dangerous, you know, this profession is, and, you know, law enforcement in general, and then of course, you know, for the FBI. You know, you were asking me challenges in, you know, my career. I will say, you know, the darkest day of my professional career was when I lost, you know, Dan and Laura. You know, two incredible agents that were killed in the line of duty, you know, performing, you know, the job that they loved and a mission that they loved, and were very committed to, which was violent crime against children.
Against children, yes.
But you know, we had a number of you know, major incidents here, from the Fort Lauderdale airport shooting. To, so you know, handling crises, you know, was something that, I don't want to say common here in Miami, but you kind of get used to that, and being able to manage that is very, very critical to not only to meet the expectations of the employees, the organization, but really the community, right? So, you know, I always would ask myself, you know, what do my employees expect of me? How do they expect me to represent them in the organization? And what is going to provide the confidence and trust in the community? So when I would be on a press conference or representing the FBI at a critical incident and things like that, you know, I I wanted to make sure I was meeting not only the agency and the employees, but also the community and the people that we serve, their expectations, their needs, and their standard.
Right. You know, I think that's one part of the Bureau that us and the other intelligence services, or former, don't give enough credit for. You guys are extraordinary public. You have a law enforcement mission as well. Us, we don't talk to anyone. We don't have to appease the community so much, if that makes sense. We're very much, you know, foreign focused exclusively. You guys are on a pedestal with everyone looking for every misstep you could possibly make. And then when you get politicization coming in and trying to drag, you know, the names down or kind of paint the Bureau in a certain light, I mean, to me, that's
very unfortunate. But if you look at, you know, and again, I can speak specifically to the Miami field office, you know, and my time here, the amount of time that we devoted to our community, not only from a investigative law enforcement perspective to protect the community, but the community programs that we were committed to really make a difference. Everything from, you know, adopt a child program to, you know, some of the schools that we had sponsored in some of the more challenging communities, underprivileged communities, you know, things like that we would do every single day, because we are part of the community, and we do want to make a difference. You know, all of that really represents who we are, and not what you see on TV.
I agree. I wish that story was told better, but you guys are so humble, you'd never tell it yourself. So, you know, kind of changing gears to your post-Bureau career. Talk to me about your jiu-jitsu competitions that you're in. Obviously, you're training out of the American Top Team Pro Gym here, which is unbelievable. Tell me a little bit about that, and kind of how you see fitness, you know, kind of strong body, strong mind, and the lessons you can take from competition into kind of the business world.
No, absolutely. A strong body definitely helps having a strong mind. So I was always very focused on physical fitness, because again, as you were asking me, you know, how did I deal with, you know, the stress of the profession and the demands and things like that, you know, having a very structured physical training program really allowed me to have that balance and have a way of de-stressing from, you know, from the demands and the you know, the impact of the profession on me. So, you know, I've always been very focused, again, you know, having that tactical SWAT background, and, you know, having to be very physically fit, and it became, you know, part of who I am and my routine. As I mentioned, I've been in martial arts my entire life, but when I moved here in 2014, I met my coach. His name is Wilson Govea, and best coach in the world, right? Former UFC fighter, just incredible. I met him at an event, and you know, he was more interested about interviewing and interrogation, and of course I knew who he was, recognizing him from the UFC. I was more interested in the UFC, MMA, and jiu-jitsu. He has a American Top Team affiliated gym, so he invited me to come and try it out and train, and I went and I fell in love with it. So I started to train, and he's the one that kind of encouraged me to think about, you know, competing and you know, taking it to that, you know, to that next level. And then after I tried my first one, then next thing I know, you know, I'm doing more, and then it literally became a second career. So I was very fortunate the FBI allowed me to have a second career as a fighter. They allowed me to have professional sponsors and all of that.
So I didn't know that happened during the Bureau.
Yes,
that's amazing.
So I was very, you know, they put
Kudos
a lot of
to the agency for that.
It's incredible agency. They, of course, appropriately and correctly put a lot of restrictions on that, so there would be no conflict of interest.
Yeah, obviously.
Yep. But I had, you know, sponsors, and then I began to, you know, see success and really get into it. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to retire when I did, because I could have gone, and my intent was to go to 57, which is the maximum age. But I had some sponsors come forward that were looking to sponsor me, and it was going to give me an opportunity to retire from the FBI and devote a certain amount of time. You know, my goal was to give at least a year, if not 2 years, just to my training, and then see how far I could take it and see, how good I could really get. And so I retired and have been training professionally or full time, for the last year or so, and it's just been incredible. It's being able to train at the best MMA gym in the world is just incredible. I train next to guys that I admired and watched and idolized on TV. Now they're teammates and partners, and still get beat up by them every day, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So George, obviously, besides fighting, I know you're doing motivational speaking as well. So for everyone that's watching, George is a great guy. I mean, listen to his story on here. I highly recommend him. You also have a new business venture. I'd love to learn a little bit more about this.
Oh, absolutely. So I've partnered with LiveTrain, which is an incredible online training platform, and we've got a couple of different projects going with them. The first one is personal safety and security for subscribers of LiveTrain or for the general public. And the idea is to provide folks with real practical knowledge and concepts to help them be safe as they enjoy the qualities of life, everything from going to the movies, how to be aware of your surroundings, going to dinner, things like that. We're getting ready to shoot an episode at an airport, at a structured garage, things that people can do to make sure that they protect themselves and their loved ones, while at the same time, being able to truly enjoy life. The second project that we have going is focused on law enforcement professionals. Recognize again the scrutiny that law enforcement is under. In one area that is really in need of development and evolution is defensive tactics and law enforcement training. So we're looking to create an online training platform for law enforcement agencies that they can provide to their officers. They can dictate how many hours a month that their officers perform the training, and it's going to be fully encompassing a law enforcement officer's career. Everything from, of course, defensive tactics, physical fitness, diet, and most importantly, mental health.
Yeah.
The suicide rate among law enforcement officers is very high, and it continues to climb, and that's really alarming, and it should concern folks because of the danger and the stress that the profession places on folks. So our goal is to provide kind of that holistic, strong body, strong mind, and then opportunity to deal with some of the difficulties of this job, so that the officers can perform at their best and best serve the community that they're committed to protecting.
Of course, I think a lot of folks don't appreciate some of the things law enforcement officials, officers see. Yeah. I mean, it could be everything from, obviously crimes against children to car accidents, and name it. So giving them all the tools, and everything you're talking about reminds me actually of a podcast. I think it was a Joe Rogan podcast with Jocko Willink.
Yes.
He's a SEAL and obviously a big jiu-jitsu guy, but they were kind of talking about the amount of training a lot of police departments get a year, and it was actually a rather small amount if the data was accurate. And I think even Jocko made a comment. Imagine if they were all purple belts in jiu-jitsu. You'd be able to, manage humans a lot better and have a lot more confidence.
The goal that I have is, my goal is to make everybody a blue belt.
Right.
Purple is tough.
That might be tough. Yeah, okay.
But, and again, one of the cool things about LiveTrain is, and one of the reasons why I partnered with them is because they already had an incredible online training platform. They have some incredible fighters like, Thiago Pitbull Alves already on, that's doing a lot of the coaching.
Sure.
Everton Oliveira, who's the strength and conditioning, Phil Daru, and then, and the list goes on and on. So they've already got an incredible world-class coaches or athletes, and now we're looking to replicate that specifically for the law enforcement professional, to provide all of those things that we just talked about that's definitely needed in the profession.
It's incredible, and I believe obviously a strong base in kind of martial arts, adding law enforcement, but other sports, golf, other activities, music. I know Live Train is continuing to push the envelope there, and there's going to be more and more and more content. And
Absolutely.
and, I'll be happy to record a cybersecurity one someday if you guys ever go down that route. But it sounds like
Maybe I'll have you on my podcast,
There we
because
go.
eventually I'm going to do one for the average person on how to protect themselves. So
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That'd be fantastic. I mean, it's an awesome
at
platform.
the basic level.
Yeah, of course. But listen, the fundamentals of anything makes you elite. That's what you have to
Exactly.
focus on.
Yeah.
So I think these platforms are really important because we have so many kind of push and pulls on our time
Absolutely.
all day long. To be able to get really elite training delivered, whether it's your iPad or your phone or on TV. I mean,
And being able to do it anywhere, whether
Yeah.
it's at home, at the police department, do it as an individual or in a group setting.
Yeah.
The goal again is to provide all of this so that the officers have a much more opportunity to improve and enhance their skill set, which again not only protects them, takes care of them, but really the community that they serve
as well. It's great to turn the ordinary human into a sensor too.
Yeah, exactly.
So really appreciate your time. And it's an
Absolutely.
exciting venture, and I'm definitely going to subscribe myself.
All right, sounds great.
Thanks, George.
Thanks, John.